Scott Jennings pretty much owns CNN. Honestly, they should just give the network to him because he already owns it. We're going to go show by show and show you how great Scott Jennings did yesterday on that very network. That's coming up in just a moment. Plus, no boys in the girls' room. You've learned that since like kindergarten, first grade, but apparently they're starting to figure it out in Congress. They're really upset that Nancy Mace doesn't want any boys in the girls' room with her. We'll get into those details. Tom Homan blows a lid off all the critics who don't want immigration laws enforced when Trump becomes president in 2 months. Oh, and Sunny Hostin over on The View, there's no two ways to say it. She hates this country, and she'll tell you so. We'll show you the video coming up right now. We're brought to you by Birch Gold. My name is Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. And speaking of our friends over at Birch Gold, for those of us holding our breath for the past several months, we can finally take a big old exhale. What a relief. The election's over. Work can finally be done on the major issues this country is facing. And one of the most significant is our national debt. The fact is our nation is broke, and that debt is a house of cards, and it's not going to be quickly or easily dismantled. So for your own personal finances, the strategy remains the same. Diversify your savings, guys. Many things are out of our control, even out of Trump's control, at least in the outset. It's important to have a safe haven for your savings. So why don't you talk to the people at Birch Gold Group? Birch Gold Group, they'll help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. And the best news is this does not cost you a penny out of pocket. Text my name, Larry, to 989898. Get a free info kit on gold. Right now, through Black Friday, you're going to receive a free 1 ounce. I don't know. I assume it's about this big. I think it's actually more about this big. You're going to get a free 1 ounce Silver Eagle. The visual aid really sells it, doesn't it? A free 1 ounce gold Silver Eagle for every $5,000 purchase with Birch Gold. Text Larry to 989898. 989898. Claim that free eligibility. Claim your eligibility for free silver today. I shouldn't try to do visual aids. It distracts me. Sorry. Thanks for watching our live stream today at Rumble and YouTube and Facebook and X and wherever else we're streaming. By the way, I got some pretty big news about some new content we're going to be streaming live coming up soon. So stay tuned for that. If 1 hour isn't enough for you, if you need more Larry in your life, we got news coming your way. We'll get to that coming up in a bit. But if you can give us some thumbs up, if you're excited about that news, give us thumbs up right now, damn it, here on the Town Hall channel. Give us some thumbs up. Give us some comments. There's going to be a lot of interaction here, and I'm going to begin with this. How much do you love Scott Jennings? Would you watch a full Scott Jennings show on CNN if they gave him one in prime time? Let us know in the comments right here, and we'll let Scott and the powers that be at CNN know about it. Give us those comments and give us a subscribe if you don't mind, because the more you do that, the more people see this show. And we're growing every single day, and we've got you to thank for it. So I'm going to give you a thumbs up myself. There's your like. I like you. We've almost become a full-on Scott Jennings fan channel over here at Town Hall because he's just so good. It's one thing for him to be sometimes the only voice of reason over on CNN, that cesspool of liberal bias and absolute Trump-hating, vile fury every single show, every single minute of the day. It's one thing for him to be the only voice in the room, but it's another thing for him to be so damn good. And yesterday was a banner day for all things Scott Jennings over on the cable news network. So let's take a look. First, we set the table. Here's how CNN presents the topic to their viewers.
President-elect Donald Trump confirming that he is going to use the U.S. military to carry out his mass deportation policy. Trump saying on social media early this morning that reports he'll declare a national emergency are true.
Wow, that's outrageous that Trump's going to do that. When was the last time a president declared a national emergency over the border crisis? I mean, you've got to go all the way back to little over 4 years ago when Donald Trump did it last time he was president. And utilizing military resources to enforce the border and deport people who shouldn't be here? I mean, that's terrible. I mean, who was the last one who did that? That was also Donald Trump the last time he was president. They're acting like their hair's on fire. It's unprecedented. This is outrageous. No, this is he said he was going to do this when he was running. What do you think people voted for? But you can't do that to American citizens, turn the military on American citizens. That's against our law. That's against posse comitatus, by the way. It's true. That's what it's called. Look it up. Using the military against American citizens. It violates that doctrine. And you'd be absolutely right. These aren't citizens. They're not even legal residents. That's the whole point. They're in the country illegally. All right, I'm sorry. CNN gets me worked up. Imagine if I had to wear a tie and sit at the table like this guy, Scott Jennings. Okay, Scott, I'm going to let you take it from here.
And think about this. The challenge of sorting through them is mammoth. We had a hard time doing it in Iraq. Okay, our troops have had a hard time doing it in Afghanistan. Trying to ask them to sort through who's who and implement a policy like this, here in the United States is like nothing we've ever seen. Actually, I mean, hold on, maybe the only precedent we have is internment camps during World War II against Japanese Americans, but there's not a military precedent for sorting through who on the Upper East Side is illegal and who's not. And you're asking a 19-year-old, right, holding a weapon, who signed up to serve his or her country, to thrust themselves into maybe the most fraught political topic that we've got in this country. People want a solution, but they don't necessarily want that one.
You twice now insinuated that Trump's going to send the military to round up American citizens, which is totally false. There are 1.3 to 1.6 million illegal immigrants in this country today who have already received deportation orders from a court. You can start there. There's another population, as Mark said, that have either committed violent crimes in the United States or committed violent crimes where they came from. You can also do that. That has nothing to do with the people in your neighborhood, has nothing to do with the person in your office, and has nothing to do with whatever the hell you're talking about. It has to do with getting people out of the country who do not belong.
How are you going to deploy the military? Give me how exactly you would deploy an active duty military unit to respond to this crisis.
I would use the military in conjunction with local officials.
But what does that look
local
like?
Law enforcement, county sheriffs, people who know their communities, because I assume a lot of the local sheriffs and jailers are going to be the people who end up housing some of these folks before they are deported. But there has to be some
purpose. What's the mission for that young private? What is he actually going to be tasked to do? Guard a gate, or is he going to be investigating?
I don't know. I wasn't elected.
But you're sitting here on CNN saying we should do it. I think you should think out a little bit more about what they actually should be required to do.
Do not belong.
It sounds real good.
One at a time. Scott, quickly.
There are millions of people who came into the country illegally, who have already received deportation orders, or who have committed some other crime while they've been here. The fact that you want to leave them in place is mind-boggling.
That is not what I said. That is not what I said.
Let me ask the same question I asked Chuck.
Yeah.
What was the mandate from the election? As much as any issue, immigration was on the ballot. So what do you think the voters were saying on immigration?
I think the voters were saying do something about it. I think broadly across partisan lines, there is almost universal need for people to do something about it. What you do about it is a totally different story. Can I finish it, or are you guys going to jump in? I know this is like the normal thing around.
This is the normal thing around here. This guy flexing his muscles as a military guy, trying to intimidate Scott Jennings. It doesn't go well for him. You'll see the end of this in just a moment. But it's a pet peeve of mine when people are just say, well, how are you going to do that? It can't be done. It can't be done. You know, it's interesting. When somebody steps up as an American citizen and says that we demand that the law be enforced, it's not the government's job now to say, well, we don't know how to enforce the law. No, your job is to do it. And to pretend like the military can't work in cooperation with local and federal law enforcement, that can't be done. How are you going to do this? What's the task? What's the duty? Every single time there's a riot or a national emergency or an earthquake or a flood or wildfires that displace people from their homes or anything, that we often use the National Guard. Governors do it all of the time. This is nothing new. And if you've got a governor with state law enforcement who are bound and determined to work with the federal government and ICE enforcement and immigration enforcement law enforcement, and you want to have additional boots on the ground to get it done, that's how you utilize military assets. This guy's completely disingenuous for claiming like, how are you going to do it? You need to tell it out. No, that's not my job to tell you how to do it. It's your job to figure it out because your job is to enforce the law. And again, I want to reiterate this whole idea of mass deportations, mass deportation. There's another phrase for mass deportations: enforcing existing immigration law. The law already states that if you're here illegally and there is a court-ordered deportation order, you must be deported. There are over 1 million in this country right now who have gotten the order for deportation, and they're hiding. They're running. They know it won't be enforced. That doesn't mean you let them hide. That doesn't mean you ignore the law. It means it's your job to enforce the law. Figure it out. But now this guy flexes. This is one of my biggest pet peeves for retired military people who go on cable news and they do this move right here.
In small numbers.
To the,
This is a very different thing.
many state. No,
You can't
I mean,
deploy them
you,
to.
you, got, you got to make your speech.
Is it a debate with you, or am I answering questions with the host? Because every time I come on, you want to sidetrack and take me into your talking points.
But by all means,
No,
have at it, my friend. You're the expert. Have at it.
no,
Have we-
I'm
have
no
we-
expert.
have we-
I'm just a
Well,
concerned
you act
American.
like one. Have we or have we not?
Have you
sent
served
the
in?
national-
Have you served in uniform?
I have served as a United States citizen.
There we go. Did you see that? Did you see that? This is, you always know that somebody has lost the debate when they pull that card. Well, have you worn the uniform? Have you served in the military? And suddenly, if you haven't served in the military, you're not allowed to have an opinion about this. That you're not allowed to actually jump on board. You know, Tom Homan, our new border czar, he's worn the uniform of law enforcement as a border patrol agent, as well as New York City and I think state law enforcement. Does he not have a right to have an opinion? I mean, this is literally his expertise, and he says, "Yeah, you bet your ass we're going to do this." You know, it's always a tell for me when a retired military goes on the air and a civilian is discussing policy with them and they try to play that trump card. Well, you've never served in the military. So by that token, that means the president, unless they've served in the military, doesn't have the right to have an opinion about these things. Or for that matter, be the commander in chief and give the order. See, here's how it works. Sir, Mr. Rykoff, since you've served in the military, you've worn the uniform, and now you're flexing that muscle as if it's some get out of jail free card or sort of trump card that silences anyone who disagrees with you. Here's my understanding of how things work. You served in the military. I think you know this. There's a chain of command. And at the very tippy top of that chain of command, can't get any higher, is the commander in chief. That would be the president of the United States. This is what he wants done, and he is ordering you to do it. That's it. That's the end of discussion. Are you telling me that the commander in chief is only allowed to give that order if he served in the military and worn the uniform himself? Oh, good. Glad you didn't try to go there. Thanks, pal. So here's what you do. You salute smartly and you charge up the hill, and you figure out how to get it done. The commander in chief has given the order. Now it's incumbent on you to do it. And if we disagree with you, we don't have to have a military record to be able to step up and have the honor of disagreeing with you. I hate it when someone does this, but it's a perfect tell of someone who's out of their depth and is losing the argument.
And if read the
But I think
newspaper
in this
where we
case,
have
in this
sent- where we
case, I
have
might
sent
have
the
a bit
National
of
Guard-
experience that you don't.
Have
I'm
you been to the border?
I'm no expert.
Have you been to the
I
border?
have not been to the border.
Oh, so
I
you're
also
not a
haven't been
genius.
deployed to the border.
Go ahead, by all means.
Regular
it.
military, regular. Is there something?
Yeah, and let's just laugh at the person instead of actually engaging. All right, so that's just the beginning of Scott Jennings. I'm sorry, this is supposed to be about Scott Jennings, but I get so worked up in these segments that I sort of want to tag team with Scott. But let's go, because he wasn't done yet. He appeared on so many different shows yesterday, and he was absolutely golden in every single one. More Jennings? You betcha more Jennings. Go Jennings.
Promise you with every fiber of my being, because I'll probably be one of those people, that if anybody comes for these people and tries to drag them out by force, there will be protests of people like me, American citizens, who are going to stand there and do everything possible to prevent these women and children, which is all who these people are.
How about the criminals?
From being,
How about the terrorists? How about the
But how do you
convicted
sort
Stop.
through
How do you know who
How
it
do you
is?
sort through?
That's the
I try-
problem.
I
You
try-
don't know who
Stop,
it is.
stop. I'm sorry. I live next to these people. I can tell you they are women and they are children. Are there terrorists among them? I don't know. But I can tell you that
And
there are.
neither does the government.
But I
which
can
is why
tell
we
you,
have to
but
figure
let
this
me tell,
out.
okay, but what I'm telling you right now, practically speaking, is that there will be people, American citizens, who will prevent these little kids from being dragged out of these shelters. There are. And what's going to happen to these people? What is going to happen to the military when the military opens fire on us?
But no one's.
Can you say? Hang on one sec, Chuck. I just
We're
wanna ask
way
you
down a
because
rabbit hole here.
Yeah, not only are we down a rabbit hole, but it's the most manipulative, emotional blackmail that you'll see. And let me just say something. It's like, it's really heart-wrenching, this person. What is it? Lift every voice, hear every voice. She's supposed to be an advocate for women and children who are just migrants here looking for a better life, even though they've broken our laws and continue our break of laws by stopping here. Someone should let her know that under the Biden administration and with Kamala Harris's assistance, her deft hand as our borders are, for the last 3.5 years, almost 4 years now, nearly 350,000 children who have come to this country by crossing our border after being exploited by God knows what south of the border with the coyotes and human strugglers and drug traffickers that let them into this country with the help of the Biden administration. Nearly 350,000 children have been lost by the Biden administration. They have no idea where they are. They're here illegally. They're supposedly asking for asylum. They're supposed to be kept track of, and they are lost. They could be sex trafficked right now. They could be part of prostitution rings right now in this country. God knows what has happened to these 350,000 children. Where is she grandstanding about that for the last 3.5 years? This is the only thing that bothers her? Sorry, you have no moral credibility with me. Don't try to stand on your high horse and play the moral high hand against me. If you haven't been sitting here screaming from the top of your lungs about the plight of those 350,000 children that your political pals lost in this country, who are being exploited as we speak, you've got no right to grandstand and say, oh, but the children and the women who will be deported. Let's start with the over 1 million people who have already got the deportation orders. They broke our laws. A judge has said they should be deported, so deport them. It's that simple.
Amazing. I did not expect Hitler to get so many meeting requests. First from Joe Biden, now from Mika and Joe. It's amazing that literal Hitler is getting all these meeting requests. And what it tells me, Professor, is that all the rhetoric that came from the left, from the Democrats, from the White House, from Kamala Harris and everyone else before the election, all of the rhetoric, the fascism, the Hitler, the Nazi rally, it was all a bunch of BS. They didn't mean any of it. And if I were in the Democrat sort of rabble's shoes, I would be looking at all my leaders and going, did you just BS me for an entire 6 weeks before the election?
Yes, and the answer is they did just BS them, as we exploded yesterday on the Joe and Mika issue. All right, now earlier in the evening, Scott Jennings, again, talking about deportation and immigration and border, was on with Jake Tapper, our favorite Jake Tapper. I do love that so many of these segments on CNN are, this just in, Donald Trump intends to do exactly what he said he would do for the last year while campaigning for president. They're outraged. They're outraged that he actually intends to enforce our immigration policies that includes the deportation of people who aren't supposed to be here. Watch this exchange, though.
Start with you. Farm industry officials and economists tell CNN that if Trump indeed goes forward with this mass deportation plan and rounds up the millions of undocumented immigrants who are working in our agricultural sector, they say high grocery prices are only going to get higher. Obviously getting rid of people who have committed crimes beyond coming into the country illegally is one thing, but deporting people who are paying taxes, keeping the food and agriculture industries running, doing jobs that native-born Americans don't want to do or not willing to do, won't this actually hurt the Americans who are already so frustrated about high prices in grocery stores?
All right. Thank you to Newsbusters for the clip. I'm going to come back on that clip and give you my own commentary on Jake Tapper, the last really good, true, honest journalist in this town. But first, we'll let you have Jennings' response to this. But boy, that question from Tapper is just gold. I'll have my crack in a second. Let's let Jennings have it first.
He's having a meltdown.
Everybody seems to be on the same sheet of music today that this is going to mess up the agriculture industry and drive the grocery prices high. I've seen numerous pieces on it. Everybody seems to be out there talking about it. And so it strikes me, Jake, that Democrats, this is their new line of attack, that Donald Trump's got a plan to raise your grocery prices simply by following through on his campaign promises. And I just don't think it's true.
I mean, I've been covering this issue since the first Bush administration in 2001. I mean, this is always one of the issues with it, is that there are a lot of undocumented immigrants who work for the agricultural sector. And there's always concerns about, are those people actually going to be deported? And if so, what happens to prices for, regular folk just trying to make an honest living and buy some eggs? Maria, Democrat.
He is so disingenuous. I got to tell you, this guy bugs the hell out of me. And this right here, that guy right there, that's the guy. Scott Jennings is properly pointing out that clearly the talking points were issued yesterday because across the board you had people, they've moved from, oh, you can't do this to women and children and abuelas and abuelitas, to, they have every right to be here because they're claiming asylum and you can't send them back to their country because they'll be killed because they're gay or what have you. They've moved from that to, it's going to cost too much to deport. I love that one. Oh, the cost of rounding everyone up and deporting them is outrageous. Meanwhile, we're literally paying to fly them into this country and fly them across and around this country. And we're putting them up in shelters, and we're giving them food, and we're giving them medical care, and we're giving them educations, and we're giving them cell phones, and we're giving them all these things. But we're now worried about the cost of actually deporting people and sending them back to the country they came from before they broke our laws. And now the latest talking point is it's going to make vegetables cost too much money. And it was across the board yesterday. And so Jennings calls him out on it. And this is what we get from Jake Tapper. We get this. He literally looks like an emoji. He looks like the colon and the backward slash emoji. So good for Scott Jennings calling him out on it. But can we just revisit this question? Because it's really a work of art from Jake Tapper.
Let's start with you. Farm industry officials and economists tell CNN that if Trump...
Farm industry officials tell CNN. In other words, he's listening to big agriculture, right? You know, I love it when individuals of the left who decry corporations and the greedy 1% and the business owners and industry owners, because they're the problem in this capitalist society, man. But when they want to make a point that they want to keep their cheap exploited labor in this country so they can have cheap kumquats in their fruit cup, Jake Tapper, now we're going to cite big agriculture. Farm industry officials tell CNN. So it's got to be true, right?
Indeed goes forward with this mass deportation plan and rounds up the millions of undocumented immigrants who are working in our agricultural sector.
Rounds up millions of undocumented immigrants that work in our agricultural center. And for those of you who are uninformed, or if you've got some liberal at your Thanksgiving dinner table next week who makes the same argument, or maybe they're on your Facebook page making that argument. Oh, who's gonna pick your fruit? Who's gonna pick your strawberries if you deport everyone? I just want you to know, you know, because you're probably sitting there, oh my gosh, we hadn't thought of that. Oh my gosh, what are we doing? How did we ever have affordable produce in this country before the 10 million all came here in the last 3.5 years? And the answer is sort of baked into the question, isn't it? There's two answers to this, by the way. One of the biggest problems in our country right now with regard to farming and agriculture is that for the first time in like centuries, literally since the dawn of the United States of America, we are right now a net importer of food, of meat, of poultry, of fruits and vegetables. We're bringing a bunch of those fruits and vegetables in from foreign countries, which is a serious problem. Okay, so actually we need to do better at growing our own food so that we're not dependent on other nations, number one. Number two, the fact is we have a guest worker program in this country. There is a legal guest worker program. It's been around for decades. Seasonal employees during harvest time can come from other countries. They can get a temporary visa so they can live in the country legally, do that farm work, and then go home. In fact, back in the 80s, many of the illegal immigrants that were in this country at that time came here on the guest worker program and then stayed. It was a problem that we needed to deal with. And apparently the way we've solved that problem is to just bypass the guest worker program entirely. Just come here illegally. It doesn't matter. And we'll pay you under the table. By the way, Jake, millions of undocumented immigrants working in farm industry jobs right now. Now, Jake, I'm not as smart as you, and I'm not a professional teleprompter reader like you are. But could I just ask you a question, or maybe you can ask yourself a question before you maintain this political position that you just posited on your own very smart show? If there are 1 million people working in the farm industry and they are undocumented, which means, of course, they don't have legal documents here in the United States of America that would allow them to work, then here's the question. Are you ready for it? How are they working? If they are undocumented, how, in fact, are they working? So I don't know about you, Jake, but when I got my job, I had to fill out a form called the I-9. And with the I-9 form, I had to produce either a passport or a social security number or a driver's license that showed that I was legally eligible to work here. So if all of those undocumented workers are working in this country without documentation, aren't they breaking the law? Don't they continue to break the law? either by utilizing identity theft and fake documents so they could fill out their I-9 form fraudulently, or they're working in cahoots with the farm industry professionals that you just cited as the experts for the premise of your question. And those farm industry experts are actually breaking our laws as well. They're all in on it together so they can exploit those individuals. Jake, I know that you only care about having cheap grapes and inexpensive apples so you can make that fabulous fruit salad and that ambrosia salad that your wife loves so much when you get into the kitchen and put on your cute apron. But you know what, Jake? Our cares, our needs, our worries, our hearts here over on Town Hall Media on this show, Larry, our concerns go well beyond you being able to afford fruit when you go to Whole Foods or Wegmans. We actually care about that person who's picking the fruit. You're fine with them being exploited as long as you don't have to pay an extra $1.50 for a basket of strawberries. But over here, we don't like the fact that those workers are being exploited by those big farm industry experts that you just got your question from and parroted on your show on CNN. Actually, we don't think that people should be treated like borderline slaves. I understand that you're interested in protecting the plantation owner. It's okay. You can have your position. It's a free country. But maybe you should ask another step 2, step 3, step 4 question before you actually grandstand in your sanctimonious way with your little smirk and furrowed brow. If there are truly millions of undocumented workers who are picking your fruit, Jake, it means they continue to break the law. The people employing them continue to break the law, and they're being exploited. And you're clearly okay with it because you need those cheap bananas for God knows what.
They say high grocery prices are only going to get higher. Obviously getting rid of people who have.
Hold on, Jake. What do you mean high grocery prices? I've been watching CNN all year long, and I've been told that inflation is going down, that Bidenomics works, that people who believe they've got expensive produce at the store are really just making it up. And they're pretending that they're lying, or they're just imagining high grocery prices. But now that the election's over and you don't have to protect Biden and Kamala Harris anymore, now you're conceding that we have high grocery prices, but your big worry is that they're going to get even higher. I just want to be clear on where CNN stands here. And what's this next point you're going to make?
Obviously getting rid of people who have committed crimes beyond coming into the country illegally is one thing.
Really? Is that obvious? Jake Tapper says, obviously, getting rid of people who are in this country who have committed crimes is one thing. Well, it wasn't that obvious for the last 8 or 9 months during the presidential election. In fact, when people maintained and said that those who are in this country illegally and continue to break the law should certainly be at the top of the list to be deported, those people were called racist and xenophobic, and building walls doesn't help anyone. And no, we're a part of a world community. And how dare you? You're upsetting people. You can't say things like that. What about the Statue of Liberty? But now Jake Tapper says, obviously, people are in this country illegally who have broken the law. That's one thing. Well, Jake, I take you back to the first part of my analysis here. If they're working in this country, they are breaking the law. And so by your own question here, your own proposition, these people who are picking your beets here, that look great looking beets, they should be deported, right? Listen to the obviously part again.
Crimes beyond.
Oh, sorry. Hold on.
Obviously getting rid of people who have committed crimes beyond coming into the country illegally is one thing.
The undocumented workers who were working, by definition, are committing crimes, either with identity theft or working under the table by being ineligible to work here. So, Jake, if it's that obvious, then your entire question makes no sense.
But deporting people who are paying taxes, keeping the food and agriculture industries running.
Paying taxes? I don't know about you, Jake, but when I pay taxes, I have to submit my social security number. That's how they track it. So if they're paying taxes and they're in this country illegally and they don't have a green card, and they're getting paid under the table, how exactly are they paying taxes? Oh, sales taxes when they go to buy things. That's not quite the same thing, is it? When people say, I work here, I live here, I'm a citizen, I pay my taxes, they mean their income taxes, Jake. I think you're being disingenuous, Jake.
running, doing jobs that native-born Americans don't want to do or not willing to do.
Doing jobs that native-born Americans don't want to do or will not do. Well, again, I refer you back to the guest worker program that has been set up specifically for that case. But I'll concede the point. There probably are native-born Americans who don't want to do these jobs or won't do these jobs at the exploitive, low slave wages that your friends in the farm industry are paying these people who are in this country illegally. But it'd be amazing to see whether we could actually find people who would do these jobs if they got a competitive wage. Oh, but that would make the kumquats in Jake Tapper's fruit salad too expensive, so we can't have that. You know what? Let's see. I'd love to see if that's the case. Because I can tell you this. There's a huge economic benefit in this country when people who were living off of the public trust and out of our tax dollars and out of an already taxed social service system that was not budgeted or designed to take on millions of people in this country who aren't even citizens. As soon as you get the economic benefit of not having to carry all of those people and deliver education and deliver medical care and deliver shelter and deliver all those things that we're currently delivering to people who are not tax-paying citizens of this country, the economic benefit of that actually will go a long way to offsetting already built-in inflation. And thus, even though you're paying higher wages, perhaps, and benefits to people who are naturally born as they pick our fruit, ultimately, actually, the economic benefits could very well outweigh it. But you know what? We never really tried because Jake Tapper won't have it. He needs to make sure his kiwis are cheap for his fruit salad. Have I mentioned he really loves his fruit salad?
Won't this actually hurt the Americans who are already so frustrated about high prices in grocery stores?
There you go. Americans are really upset about high prices in grocery stores now, finally, suddenly, not during the election, but now they're really upset, and we don't want to make it worse. Where were you, Jake? Where were you, Jake, for the last 3.5 years when every single economic government spending decision that this administration made things much, much, much worse? You were nowhere. And now the only time you've decided to draw the line and call into question a government policy that will make grocery store prices more expensive is, in fact, the enforcement of our immigration laws. That's the one policy you decide to speak out against. What a disingenuous, sanctimonious fuckhead. I don't think I timed that beep out right. Scott Jennings is pure gold at CNN. If they were smart, they'd give him a show, but they're not smart. They'll just expand Jake Tapper's role. And Scott Jennings is continuing to do a great job. And, well, the next day I'll be able to do this. Love you, Jake. Never change. Did I mistime that, Kevin? Could you hear my the F word?
It'll get fixed.
Thanks for that. Sorry about that, guys. I'm not a big fan of Jake Tapper. Could you tell? You've known since kindergarten that boys don't belong in the girls' room and girls don't belong in the boys' room. You've also known in kindergarten, by the way, the difference between a boy and a girl. So I think that you should take that valuable lesson that your 5-year-old has learned, and you need to send some kind of educational program to members of Congress because they don't know that fundamental truth. It took Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina to introduce a new piece of legislation yesterday, specifically citing that biological men don't belong in private women's spaces. She says, period, full stop, end of story. She had to put a resolution in place so that Congress will adopt these rules to ensure that places designated for women on Capitol Hill, be it restrooms or be it the locker room or the gym or what have you, if it's designated for women, then only women are there. Now, why do we need that law in Congress? Well, because I don't know if you saw this or not, history was made this election day. A glass ceiling was shattered. We have our first transgender woman elected to Congress. This person's name is Sarah McBride from Delaware. And I point out now the reason why we need this law, specifically defining that only biological women can go into the locker rooms and bathrooms, and that should not include transgender women. And I need to point out the fact that transgender women are not biological women. I need to say that because we even have the term transgender woman in our vocabulary. I mean, if transgender women were women, then you wouldn't call them transgender women, would you? You'd just call them women. And history wouldn't be made because no one would care, because some chick named Sarah McBride in Delaware just won an election. But no, Sarah McBride is not just some chick. Sarah McBride is a glass ceiling breaker, shattered that glass ceiling. Sarah McBride made history. Sarah McBride is like Rosa Parks. Sarah McBride is like Jackie Robinson. Sarah McBride gets all of these accolades and is able to raise all this money because Sarah McBride is the first transgender woman. So you're not allowed to have all the boy equipment down there, dressed like a woman, and grandstand as some sort of huge civil rights icon. But then when it comes time to say, well, wait a minute, you're not just a woman then, are you? Say, how dare you? I'm just a woman. I'm just like Nancy Mace. I'm just like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm just like Nancy Pelosi. Well, if you are, then what ceiling did you really shatter? You see how they like to have it both ways? Well, here's Sarah McBride. And Sarah McBride is very upset that she's not allowed to go hang in the locker room with Nancy Mace. Sarah McBride says everyday Americans go to work with people who have life journeys different than their own and engage with them respectfully. I hope members of Congress can muster that same kindness. See, you have to have kindness for Sarah McBride, the dude who dresses like a woman who wants to go in the women's locker room and get undressed next to Nancy Mace. But you're not allowed to have any sort of kindness to Nancy Mace, right? That kindness doesn't exist. She doesn't deserve your kindness. Only the dude who wants to invade women's private spaces, that's the person who gets kindness. Sarah McBride goes on, it's a blatant attempt from far right-wing extremists to distract from the fact that they have no real solutions to what Americans are facing. We should be focused on bringing down the cost of housing, healthcare, and childcare, not manufacturing culture wars. Delawareans sent me here to make an American dream more affordable and accessible, and that's what I'm focused on doing, Delawareans. By the way, there's Sarah. That's Sarah right there. Just a few years ago, Sarah was Tim. Now going by Sarah. That's the person who wants to be able to get undressed right next to Nancy Mace, right next to AOC as well. So Sarah says, if I can quote one more time, I hope members of Congress can muster that same kindness. See, this is about kindness. It's kindness to allow this person right here that you're seeing to now wear their hair long, get dressed up in a mini skirt, and go get undressed next to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Nancy Mace. That's kindness. And by wanting to protect Nancy Mace from having to deal with this guy getting undressed and swinging his dong around in the women's locker room, if you want to protect Nancy Mace from having to deal with that humiliation, that's not kindness. No, kindness only goes one way. Here's the thing about Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace is the first woman to graduate from the Citadel, the military academy in South Carolina, and she's served in the military admirably. She's no blushing flower. I assure you, her time at the Citadel and in the military exposed her to many, many toxic masculine sort of demonstrations. Okay, she's no daisy that needs protecting. All right, it's not about that. There's another thing about Nancy Mace that not a lot of people know. When she was 16 years old, she was sexually assaulted by a man. It seems to me that a woman that has had to go through that trauma and abuse and sexual assault at the hands of a man, I think she deserves the grace to be able to set her own boundaries. And if she's setting her boundaries in a women's locker room and in a women's restroom, maybe we should sort of show some kindness to her and defer. And who knows how many other women who are members of Congress right now who have not courageously stepped forward like Nancy Mace and told her personal story. That it could be my wife, it could be my daughter, it could be my mother serving in Congress right now who has a traumatic experience in her past. And maybe, just maybe, not having to have a naked man against her consent parading around in the locker room next to her named Tim, who now wants to be called Sarah, maybe we should defer to them. Maybe that's kindness, Sarah. But you know how this story goes. Thankfully, as I mentioned, Nancy Mace, no blushing flower. You don't graduate from the Citadel as the first woman in that institution and then serve in the military without being able to show some cojones yourself. Rhetorical ones, not actual ones like Tim Sarah has. Nancy Mace ain't backing down.
The radical left is calling me an extremist for being a feminist, fighting to protect the rights of women and girls. If being a feminist makes me an extremist or a bigot or a monster, I am totally here for it, because I'm going to fight like hell for every woman and every little girl across this country to protect you and keep you safe.
Good for you, Nancy Mace. And yeah, I love the fact that a badass woman like that is redefining and seizing, capturing, reclaiming the word feminist. Because feminists are supposed to stand up for women and girls. And if you're saying this is all politics and they're making just a big deal out of it, it's only one person in Congress to deal with it. This sends a message, because if Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and all of the women in Congress, if they can't defend and protect their own rights to private spaces, then who's going to stick up for that 7-year-old girl in an elementary school who deserves the exact same protections? Speaker Mike Johnson was asked about this, sort of, by the media. They're setting this up as a trap, by the way, but it's not going to work. A trap only works if there's actually, claws attached to it that can cause some pain and inflict harm and damage. But it's like these people weren't paying attention to this last election, and they didn't recognize exactly what time it is in this country. Watch Mike Johnson handle it rather deftly.
Mr. Speaker, is freshman-elect Sarah McBride a man or a woman?
All right, so you heard the question. Is Sarah McBride a man or a woman? You see, it's a trap. And you can see the smirk as Mike Johnson decides to handle the question. And watch how he deftly handles it, because politics is important, and being political is an important skill. Me, personally, I would say, well, I certainly don't define Sarah McBride as a woman. Sarah McBride defines themselves as a woman, and we'll let just the chips fall where they may. But how they define themselves, or how I define them, is meaningless. It's how science defines them. But let's see how Mike Johnson handles it.
Look, I'm not going to get into this. We welcome all new members with open arms who are duly elected representatives of the people. I believe it's a command that we treat all persons with dignity and respect, and we will. And I'm not going to engage in silly debates about this. There's a concern about the uses of restroom facilities and locker rooms and all that. This is an issue that Congress has never had to address before, and we're going to do that in deliberate fashion with member consensus on it, and we will accommodate the needs of every single person. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Do you plan on bringing Nancy Mace's transgender bill and putting that into the rules package?
I'm not going to address the plans on any of that. I just told you what I'm going to say about the issue. I'm not going to engage in this. We don't look down upon anyone. We treat everybody with dignity and respect. That's a principle that I've pursued my whole life, and we will take care of this issue of first impression for Congress, as we will any other thing. We'll provide appropriate accommodation for every member of Congress.
All right. Now, a lot of people interpreted that as, oh, Mike Johnson isn't going to engage in this, so he's not going to bring the bill and everything. And that would be a misreading of what you just heard from Mike Johnson. What he's saying when he says, I'm not going to engage in this, I'm not going to engage in it, he means there at the podium with the media and with the press. The bottom line is everyone in Congress will be accommodated, but we will also deal with this as a consensus. The majority will rule in the House of Representatives. Sarah, what's the person's name? Sarah McBride. Sarah McBride does not have the heckler's veto. Sarah McBride is not allowed to stand up there dressed as a woman and say, I don't care what everyone says, I'm going to demand what I'm going to demand. No, that's not what time it is. And by the way, Olivia Beavers from Politico, is that right? Olivia Beavers? Beavers, okay. Sure, why not? Olivia Beavers of Politico reported very briefly after that statement from Speaker Johnson. She says, Speaker Mike Johnson told the GOP conference today that transgender women won't be allowed to use the women's bathrooms in the Capitol per two sources. It comes as Rep. Mace puts forward a bill on the matter. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene confirmed this when I asked her about GOP leadership backing up this view. He said there's not going to be any biological men using our restrooms, she said. Nancy Mace says, as you can see down here, this is correct. In fact, Nancy Mace, who has proposed this, spoke to the media specifically about this.
Today and last night, for fighting to protect women and girls, it's ridiculous. So if that being a feminist makes me an extremist, I'm totally here for it.
Is this effort in response to Congresswoman McBride coming to Congress?
Yes, and absolutely, and then some. I'm not going to stand for a man. If someone with a penis is in the women's locker room, that's not okay. And I'm a victim of abuse myself. I'm a rape survivor. I have PTSD from the abuse I've suffered at the hands of a man. And I know how vulnerable women and girls are in private spaces. So I'm absolutely 100% going to stand in the way of any man who wants to be in a women's restroom, in our locker rooms, in our changing rooms. I will be there fighting you every step of the way.
Yeah, she said it all. A person with a penis does not belong in the women's room. I want you to picture this. Whatever you care about Nancy Grace, picture your daughter, picture your sister, picture your mother getting ready to work out at the YMCA, and right next to them, fully naked, is a person with a penis. Now, I understand that this is how Sarah McBride presents himself right now. And you know what? I'll be honest. Compared to some other transgender dudes I've seen dressing up like women, this is a little bit more convincing than others. It's not great, but it's more convincing. But here's the thing. When you're naked, there's no fooling anyone. You got what you got. And I don't think my wife or my mother or my aunt or my daughter or my congresswoman should have to be confronted with that reality in their private space. And why is that a controversial position? Because they're coming down hard on Nancy Mace right now. It continued after session on the steps of the Capitol last night.
Not be in the locker room, should not be in changing rooms, should not be in our restrooms either. And I'm going to be standing in the brink, standing in his or her way, putting a stop to this insanity and this nonsense. She doesn't get a say. This is about real women and women's rights. And the far left, radical left, they want to erase women and women's rights, and I'm not going to let them.
Would you want Sarah McBride then to use the men's restroom outside of the changing room?
If she's was born a biological male, she should use the men's restroom.
How
That's
does
how it should
one?
work.
How would? What's the mechanism for checking who's qualified to use the ladies' room then? Like just sort of generally. Obviously, Sarah McBride has identified herself as a trans person, but are you? What would be the like? I guess
Here's the deal: biological men shouldn't be in women's private spaces. Period. End of story.
So this is specifically because Sarah McBride is coming to Congress.
That and more. So, I mean, we can't do it here. We can't do it anywhere. I've been strong on women's rights for several years now, and it's time to make sure that we protect women and girls everywhere. And it doesn't stop here.
Yeah. By the way, I do love that question, but you got to be a DC reporter to have to ask a question like that. What would be the mechanism of policing this policy? Well, I don't know, pal. What's the mechanism right now? What's that? They're acting like this is some new revolutionary idea. You know, for right up until about a minute and a half ago, there were men's rooms and women's rooms. Ubiquitous, everywhere. That's how it's been. You guys come in and you change this all of a sudden 90 seconds ago, and someone draws a line and says, whoa, 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 no. We've always had a men's and a women's room. Men use men's room. Women use women's rooms. We're going to continue to have men's and women's rooms. Well, what exactly is the mechanism for something like that? How exactly do you know? How have we known for the last, 10,000 years of humanity on this planet? Nancy Mace was very diplomatic, very political, very assertive, but even afforded Sarah McBride, she pronouns in her interviews. Let's turn to Marjorie Taylor Greene now, who's great. Not so diplomatic, though.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace has a new resolution that would ban transgender women from using the women's bathroom at the Capitol. Is that something that you would support, or like what are your? It's a brand new resolution that was just introduced in the last hour or two.
Oh, gotcha. I support a resolution that keeps all biological men out of women's bathrooms, locker rooms, and private places. Not only here in the Capitol complex, our office buildings, but all taxpayer-funded facilities.
How does one? I guess the logistics question would be: how does one check, like, if someone is qualified to use the ladies' room? Then in that case? Obviously, there's a new openly transgender member of Congress, but
Right, which is
more
a
generally.
man. He's a man. He's a biological male, so he is not allowed to use our women's restrooms, our women's gym, our locker rooms, and our spaces that are specified for women. He's a biological male. He has plenty of places he can go.
Okay, and should they make I guess gender neutral bathrooms? I guess logistically, what happens if they have to go to the
in the
bathroom?
men's room, and he has a bathroom in his office, just like all of us do. And that's where I use the restroom most of the time in my office. If he has a bathroom that'll be designated for him. But men need to respect our spaces. And that's what this election was all about. This was a mandate from the American people that are not only fed up with the open borders, they're fed up with inflation, they're fed up with the economy, but they're fed up with the left shoving their sick trans ideology down our throats and invading our spaces in our women's sports. So sorry for the uncomfortable question, but I'm giving you the direct answer. The American people spoke at the election. They're sick of this shit. And so the new member of Congress that was voted into Congress on behalf of his district in Delaware needs to respect my space, my privacy, and other women's space and privacy because he is not a woman. So that's my answer.
There you go. He's a man. He needs to respect our space because he is a woman. He is not a woman. And the American people are sick of this. Marjorie Taylor Greene, ladies and gentlemen. And again, I just want to reiterate. This is who we're talking about. This is who we're talking about. All right. That's Tim McBride in college. And now this is Sarah McBride in Congress. And I recognize that when you look at these two pictures, it's like, wow, he doesn't look like that anymore. Different appearance, right? Okay. I suppose. Sure. So is that all it takes? I mean, to coin a phrase, is that what makes a woman a woman? Is that it? That's the entirety of it? Because if so, if I may, with all due respect, you have a pretty low regard for women. If that's all it takes. Long hair, put on a dress, put on some lipstick, maybe even take hormones to grow a pair of boobs. And that's all it takes. That's what makes somebody a woman. Might be old-fashioned, but I actually think there's a lot more to that. A whole lot more.
Some super chats.
Oh, hey, super chats. You betcha super chats. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for jumping in there. Angie Kochi with $4.99. I love your show. I get the latest news and a few laughs as a bonus. I appreciate you. What do you mean laughs? This is a very serious program. Wait, are people laughing at us, Kevin? Are they? What do I amuse them? We're not trying to be funny. I'm a little offended now. All right, we are going for some laughs. NYC Moto Rider. Ooh, and some Korean language there too. $5. Thank you so much. Larry is a cool modern day John Newland, host from One Step Beyond, explaining the liberal insane left. We appreciate you and Kevin. Yeah, throw Kevin a bone there. Do we know John Newland and One Step Beyond? Do I need to look that up? Or is that like his uncle and he just wanted to name check him for $5? Not sure, but thank you for that. See Sengarli for $1.99. Is Ilhan Omar's brother okay with? That's a good question. That's a very good question. Yeah, I think it could get ugly there if they end up getting undressed next to each other. All right. Oh, all right. We good? We good? We good. All right, let's get to it. Yesterday's news, a lot of hysteria about the enforcement of immigration laws, mass deportations. And of course, now we have a lot of Democrats who are grandstanding saying that they will not cooperate with the Trump administration should they ask for support from local law enforcement to round up and deport people, criminals who shouldn't be walking the streets. Good upstanding residents like the alleged murderer of Laken Riley. These Democrats want to protect guys like that. And the latest added to the list is the mayor of Boston. Take a gander.
What will Boston's response be if these mass deportations take place? Yeah, look, elections have consequences, and the federal government is responsible for a certain set of actions, and cities, no individual city can reverse or override some parts of that. But what we can do is make sure that we are doing our part to protect our residents in every possible way, that we are not cooperating with those efforts that actually threaten the safety of everyone by causing widespread fear and having large-scale economic impact.
Large-scale economic impact. I do love what they love their cheap stuff, right? She loves having a cheap babysitter and maybe somebody to clean their toilets and mow the grass. Although I'm thinking the mayor of Boston has some security details at her disposal, so she doesn't really have to worry about the crime issues that are associated with illegal immigration, especially in the immigrant neighborhoods that she doesn't live in. It's convenient how that works out. But also, again, forgive me if I'm being inappropriate here and all, but this whole idea of protecting our residents. So tax dollars in the city of Boston and the state of Massachusetts will be used to protect residents who, by definition, are not taxpayers, of course, residents who are non-citizens and non-legal residents. They're just here illegally. They just showed up maybe 2 years ago, but they deserve the protection of the Boston police. What are the crime statistics in Boston right now? I'm just curious how well this mayor has been doing at protecting the longtime tax-paying citizens of her city versus now expending her budget to protect people who have come here from Nicaragua and have only been here for 2 years. Also, this whole idea that it's an unsafe situation because you're creating fear in a community that they might be deported. You know, if they know they're here illegally, they know they're not supposed to be here. They've gotten a notice of deportation and they have defied that notice of deportation and they've stayed here. Well, can I just say, and I, again, hate to be indelicate, but they should be afraid. That's the whole point. You know, listen, I don't know about you. When you get a summons in the mail, you know, maybe something from the IRS who has a question about your tax return, or maybe you get, you know, something that from the Department of Motor Vehicles because you got caught in a speed camera if you live in a jurisdiction that has speed cameras. And, you know, you get that rush in your body, right? It's like, oh, crap, this is a letter from the government. What's wrong? Or how about when you're driving down the expressway and suddenly you see those red and blue flashing lights in your rear view mirror and you are scared and frustrated and annoyed that you've got to pull over, and like that feeling of dread. You know, when we enforce the laws in our country to people who have broken the laws of our country, that feeling of fear and dread is sort of baked in the cake. It's part of how we keep people from breaking the law, Madam Mayor. So if you have residents in your city right now that are facing a legal deportation notice because they are in this country illegally and they have broken our laws and they're concerned that they might get deported and so they're afraid of that, they should be afraid. And maybe the best thing they can do is to leave on their own accord. In fact, I would maintain that the Trump administration's policy should be just that. Okay, here's the deal. We are going to deport the millions of people who have come here during the Biden administration and who are breaking our laws. If you leave on your own accord, you let us know so we don't have to spend any money and any energy deporting you. We will cross you off the list. You show us proof that you have left. And then you can legally come back to this country. You can legally go through the process in your country, wait in line, and come here legally. But if we have to spend time and money and risk of our law enforcement officers to apprehend you and physically deport you, you are never allowed back again. Ever. I think that would be a good deal. And I think you'd see a lot of people leaving voluntarily. Don't you? I think you would. But she's concerned that there's fear in their communities. Well, Tom Homan is your brand new border czar under the Trump administration. And one of the reasons why he got that job is because he pushes back on this kind of thing. Here's his response to the good mayor of Boston.
Defending our residents every possible way. Well, she's not very smart, I'll give her that. Because what I just said is President Trump's going to prioritize public safety threats. What mayor or governor doesn't want public safety threats out of their communities? I mean, that's her number one responsibility, is protect her communities. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So she helps us, she gets the hell out of the way. because they're going to do it. And look, there's a clear line here, and they can't cross a clear line. I would suggest she read Title 8, United States Code 1324 III, that says, you can't harbor and conceal an illegal alien from front of law enforcement. So I hope she don't cross that line. They can not cooperate, but there are certain laws in place that they can't cross, and I hope she doesn't cross it.
I hope you picked up on that at the end there. It's one thing not cooperating. There's another thing where you cross the line and you actually harbor criminal illegal aliens who are facing deportation. If you're protecting them and harboring them, Madam Mayor, well, you're breaking the law too. And boy, I would love to see that stare down, wouldn't you? But that was last night on Newsmax. Earlier this morning, Homan showed up on Fox and Friends and expanded on this conversation because, well, it's a big one going on right now as the left wing in this country realizes that Donald Trump actually intends to do exactly what he said he would do when he was running for office.
Right now. Hey, Tom.
Good morning.
So, brother, let's break down this because, you see all these media experts saying that Abuela is going to be deported. I think you have two priorities, right? First, you got to get the criminal element, which everyone agrees with. And then number two, you go straight for those 8 million people that have been coming across the border under Joe Biden, right?
Yeah, we got three rails of business, Lawrence. First of all, we got to secure the border. We know how to do that. We've done it before. Second of all, we need to run this deportation operations. The president's been clear. Out of the gate, we're going to focus on public safety threats and national security threats first. And fugitives, those who cross the border legally, had great due process at great taxpayer expense, were ordered removed by an immigration judge and didn't leave. They're also a priority. And third rail, we got to find over 300,000 children that were released into this country to so-called sponsors that the government can't find. We also got to find them children and try to save them.
So real quick, Tom, do you deputize the local, like state police, like Texas DPS wants to work with ICE? They want to work with the Border Patrol. Do they get deputized to help out with this crisis?
Yeah, we're going to fight with the 287G jail program, 287G task force programs, those law enforcement agencies that want to help. Since I've been announced, Lawrence, I've gotten thousands of soldiers that just recently left the military. They want to join forces. Police officers that retired want to join forces. But retired Border Patrol agents, retired ICE agents that want to come back. Retirement from Border Patrol, that paperwork is pulled back. There's a lot of excitement to do this job for the President of the United States.
Yeah. Tom, I want to get your reaction to this story. Apparently, the roommate of the illegal immigrant accused of murdering Laken Riley testified yesterday that they took the humanitarian flight from New York City to Georgia before they killed Laken Riley. What's your reaction to that?
Look, he should have been arrested by ICE in New York City, but they're sanctuary city. He should never be in the country. Under President Trump, he wouldn't have been here. He would have been waiting in Mexico under the Remain in Mexico program. But here's what I want. For all those mayors and governors who said they're going to push back on ICE to do this operation, I want you to listen to that tape of that young lady fighting for her life, fighting for her breath. She did not want to die, and she fought hard. Listen to it. Just don't say, okay, another one died. No, I want you to listen to the struggles, because that happens across this country almost every day by an illegal alien. So I want those sanctuary city people out there saying they're going to push back on ICE. Listen to that and tell me. I just said President Trump wants to take public safety threats off the street. That's a priority. As elected mayor, elected governor, are you telling me that you don't want public safety threats out of your communities? That is your number one responsibility, to protect your community. So smarten up and work with us.
Tom, real quickly, what happens to a mayor or a local police department chief that is under Democratic leadership that obstructs ICE in your federal agents that are helping get these deportations? What happens to them?
Well, first of all, if they don't want to help us get the hell out of the way, we're going to do it. If I got to send twice the amount of resources to that city, that's what we're going to do. If they would give us access to the jail, that would mean less agents in the community. For them pushing back and not letting us in the jail, it just means more agents are going to be in the community, so they're hurting themselves. Finally, I'll say this. They need to educate themselves. They need to review this. Title 8, United States Code 1324 III. Read about that and don't cross that line, because it is a felony to harbor and conceal an illegal alien from ICE. Read the statute. Don't cross that line.
All right. He repeated what he said last night on Newsmax, and it's a great forceful. Listen, this is why we love Tom Homan. I got to tell you, though, I'm of two minds on this. My instinct, Tom Homan just says, you got to cooperate with us. But if you don't, we don't care. You get out of our way, we'll double down and we'll bring in the resources so that we can do our job and deport people who shouldn't be in this country. I get it. I do. But part of me thinks that they should take the opposite approach. Part of me is like, okay, what do we got? Massachusetts, Illinois, Maryland, Delaware, California. They refuse to cooperate with ICE. They refuse to cooperate with the deportation. They want to protect the people who are illegally in this country. You know what? Okay, fine. Keep them. Keep them. In fact, we're going to let everybody know in this country. Here's the deal. You see these states right here on this map? These governors, these states, these jurisdictions, they're cooperating with us. And we're going to work in a robust partnership with those states. We're going to identify those criminal illegal immigrants who are not supposed to be in this country. They will be deported. So we want every criminal illegal immigrant to know that if you're living in those states right now, we are coming for you, and local, state, and federal law enforcement will be working together in tandem to get it done. But if you go to these states, if you go to California, if you go to Massachusetts, if you go to Illinois, Delaware, Maine, Connecticut, New York, they'll protect you. So if you want to be deported, if you want to be apprehended, if you want to be sent back to your home country and never allowed back in America again, stay right where you are. Stay in Texas, stay in Florida, stay in Georgia, stay in Alabama, stay in Tennessee. But if you want safe haven, if you want sanctuary, you better get your butt to California, Illinois, Massachusetts. You go to those states right now. You've got a week. You've got, well, don't worry, those states will give you all the health care you want. They'll give you all the education you want. They'll give you all the benefits you want. They'll take care of you. They've told us already. They've told the world. Gavin Newsom, he's got a whole open cookie jar over there in California. You go and enjoy. You get out of the state you're in right now because we're coming for you. You see, I want them to say that. I want the Trump administration to make that very well known, because you know what will happen. The greatest mass deportation from conservative Republican-led states will occur, and they'll all go to those states because they know they'll be safe. They know they have sanctuary. And of course, the Trump administration needs to let those states know that they will be getting no additional funding, no additional no money. Absolutely not. You've made this choice. You're on your own. I got to tell you something. You saw some blue states turn red or a little bit more purple this last election. You do that, and you're looking at a very, very red country from coast to coast. And it won't take too long. Not at all. Gavin Newsom thinks he wants to be president of the United States. Jabba Pritzker up there in Illinois thinks he can be president of the United States. Get ready for the influx of people coming from the red states that surround you, and you'll see how quickly you lose support across the board in your state. Part of me wants the Trump administration to do that. Part of me wants Tom Homan to do that. It's a very enticing idea. But then I think better of it. It feels good to say it, doesn't it? But then we need a reality check, because the fact of the matter is the next Laken Riley is probably living in one of those states. And see, we have to do whatever we can to keep that from happening again, because it keeps happening every single day, many times a day. So as much as politically I want that to happen, realistically, we just got to get this job done. And to that end, Tom Homan, one more hit earlier today on Fox News. He was obviously there in the New York studios. He specifically spoke out about those 300,000+ children that the Biden administration and Kamala Harris have lost in this country.
A lot of people have wondered, how is this going to work? So how will it work?
Well, look, I think the president's been clear on the stage. As far as the deportation operation, we will prioritize public safety threats and national security threats, because they pose the biggest danger to the United States. He's got three rails. So we'll do the deportation operation with the priorities I just talked to you out of the gate. That'd be the priorities. Second thing is secure that border. Lock that border down and catch release and secure the border. The third rail is we got over 300,000 missing children. Over 500,000 children have been trafficked into the United States. This administration released them to unvetted sponsors, and they can't find 300,000 of them. And based on my 3.5 decades, some of these children are in forced labor. We already found some in forced labor. Some are in forced sex trafficking. Some of them are pedophiles. We need to save these children.
We need to save these children. That is the bottom line. We need to save these children, and we need to prosecute the adults who have trafficked them here, harbored them here, and continued to contribute to the conditions that have allowed them to be exploited in such a horrible way. We are a moral nation. That morality guides our laws and the enforcement of those laws. And I refuse to take a back burner or a back seat or to allow anybody on the left to grandstand on this issue and pretend as though they have the higher moral ground as they continue to protect the status quo that allows those 300,000 children to face God knows what kind of horrors they're facing right now. All righty. When last we checked in on The View, Whoopi Goldberg was defaming a woman who ran a bakery by saying that they were racist or sexist or maybe just MAGA. Let's just leave it at that. She got into a lot of hot water by claiming that this bakery on Staten Island wouldn't make her favorite cupcakes. Good God, what world are we living in right now? Because of her politics. Well, it turns out it was a lie. And the Staten Island borough president, as well as this woman who owns this bakery, who has been in her family for like over 150 years, they spoke out against it. And hopefully they're going to be suing ABC News, The View, Whoopi Goldberg, and just throw Disney and the whole Mickey Mouse crew in with the lawsuit while you're at it. Well, Whoopi's been a little chagrined. She's been taking a back seat there on The View and allowing Sonny Hostin to do the anti-American rants. And yesterday was no exception.
A new article in the Wall Street Journal claims that the shift to the right in this election reveals that Americans view themselves as belonging to a particular economic class more than their race and gender. And Bill Maher said it's not the only thing Democrats got wrong. Take a look.
Someone must tell the usual suspects on the far left that the saying is, when you're in a hole, stop digging. You just lost a crazy contest to an actual crazy person. What a shocker that the people who see everything through the lens of race and sex see their election loss as a result of racism and sexism. Yes, if only we weren't so irredeemably unenlightened, we would have elected a black president by now. Oh, what, we did? Asked if racism is built into our society. White progressives agreed with that at higher levels than black and Hispanic people. They don't want your pity. And black people can't afford to indulge rich white people's need to endlessly flagellate themselves. They just want prices to go down and good jobs and the police when you call them.
Well, if he's right, then why didn't people vote for the former prosecutor who actually had policy plans to help the working class? I mean, again, I got my popcorn. I don't know why people did what they did. I see all these reasons. And so, okay, time will tell. But what do y'all think?
I just, I know that as a country, it's very difficult for people to believe that racism and misogyny, they're just alive and well. I think that we don't want to think that about ourselves, our neighbors, our friends. But it's my lived experience tells me that it does still exist, even if your lived experience doesn't tell you that it exists. And, the facts support that. I think we have a graph. If you look at there's a clear racial divide in who voted for Trump as opposed to who voted for Kamala Harris.
All right, so we're going to pause here. We're going to let Sonny continue with her anti-American, racist, and sexist tirade here. But she wanted to bring data to the equation with a visual aid. She brought a graph to explain the racism and the sexism in this country. So let's take a look at her data for a second, because if you actually use your brain for a second and actually logically think these numbers through, you will see that it does definitely tell a story about racial bias and maybe even racial discrimination and bigotry in this country, but it's not exactly the story that Sonny Hostin is telling. So let's go from the bottom up here. I don't know what other is, so set other aside for a second. But other went 54% to 42% for Donald Trump. Okay, Asian, 54% to 39% for Kamala Harris. Okay. So about a 15% swing of Asian Americans. Hispanic Latino Americans, a little bit closer. 52% of Hispanic Latino Americans went for Kamala Harris, while 46% went for Donald Trump. Let's skip black voters for a second and let's go up to white voters. White voters went 57% for Donald Trump, 41% for Kamala Harris. Again, that's about a 16% swing. That's about the same swing as Asian Americans and a little bit bigger than the swing of Hispanic Americans, right? So, okay, whites go for about 15, 16% for Donald Trump. These other ethnic groups, Asian, Latino, go 15, maybe about 13% for Kamala Harris, right? So now let's look at black voters. Black voters went 85% for Kamala Harris and 13% for Donald Trump. Now, if you're Sonny Hostin and you see that 85% of black Americans voted for the black candidate and only 13% voted for the white candidate, and then you look at white voters, and white voters, 57% went for Trump, but 41% went for Kamala Harris. You look at that and you say, aha, you see, whites are racist. They wouldn't vote for the black person. I look at that and I say, whoa, 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 wait a minute here. 41% of white people voted for the black woman. And only 13% of black people voted for the white guy. Now, if you're using this chart to say that we have a racial divide in this country and that race motivates people's thought processes and ideas and how they vote, I think that the clear story from this data that Sonny Hostin herself put in front of us actually shows that black people were motivated by race, not white people. Clearly, that's what these numbers show. Logically, that's the only conclusion you can reach. And again, I don't like thinking in these terms. I don't like thinking black people do this and white people do that. But it's Sonny Hostin who is trying to make this case. She's trying to point to this and say, you see, white people are racist. And apparently, the only thing that would solve this for her, to prove to Sonny Hostin that white people aren't racist, is for the numbers to be exactly the same for white people to overwhelmingly vote for the black candidate, just as black people overwhelmingly. So when black people overwhelmingly vote 85 to 13% for the black candidate instead of the white candidate, they're not being racist. But if white people do the same thing, and to a lesser degree, they are being racist. And the only thing to prove that white people aren't racist is if they do exactly what Sonny Hostin wants them to do. That's what she's saying. And yet the data actually blows her argument apart. In fact, it turns the argument right back on her. But we'll let Sonny continue because she's smarter than all of us.
It's very clear. It's not only clear by race, but it's also clear by education. And so the notion somehow that that is not true, this is by education. Those who attended college voted for her at a higher degree than those that didn't.
But I
and
think
I've
you're
said
missing
that.
his point.
Right. Now, listen, say what you will about the attending college questions, although I will point out in here, I would love to see the attended college versus didn't attend college numbers also shot through the prism of union membership and entrepreneurship. Because I would love to see how many of those who either never attended college or attended college but received no degree, how many of them own their own businesses, right? I would love to see how that is reflected in here. I know that's a little nuanced for people like Sonny Hostin. I would also like to see how many children these people have and whether they're married with children and what that does. I would also like to see the never attended college or attended college but received no degree, whether they live in rural areas of this country, right? And maybe even are affected by rural issues and suburban issues versus living in an urban area. That said, I just want you to know, never attended college, 63% to 35% Republican to Democrat, versus advanced degree, 59% to 38% Democrat over Republican, that does tell a tale. It really does. Sonny Hostin would have you say that that means that you're stupid if you vote Republican. I would argue that this has little to do with intelligence as it has to do with education. And please, my friends, don't ever confuse education with intelligence. They are two very, very different things. But I will also say this: advanced degree, bachelor's degree, JD, MA, MBA, MD, PhD, you know, all of those people have two things in common. Well, three things in common, I guess. They vote Democrat as one of them. Number two, they think of themselves as highly educated and therefore highly intelligent. But number three, and probably the most important factor, is they're probably carrying a whole lot of student loan debt. And I happen to know for a fact that one political party has been spending a lot of time over the last several years on the untenable political promise that they would relieve student loan debt. In fact, Joe Biden has unconstitutionally defied a Supreme Court order and relieved a lot of student loan debt for many people in this country. So if you're carrying all that debt with those advanced degrees, it's sort of in your self-interest to continue to vote for the people who will literally write you a check for 30 grand so you don't have to pay that debt back. Maybe this has less to do with how smart you are, and it has a little bit more to do with your own personal self-interest, so you can get bailed out of a really stupid decision you made to laden yourself with debt so you can get advanced women's studies degree and an anthropology minor, and now you've realized that you're qualified to be a barista at a high-end Starbucks.
That is not true. This is by education. Those who attended college voted for her at a higher degree than those that didn't.
But I
and
think
I've
you're
said
missing
that.
his point.
Let me just finish. And so I've said that before, and there was so much backlash because I think it's an uncomfortable, inconvenient truth about this country.
But his whole point is they did.
I just said the people who vote for Trump are stupid, racist, and sexist, and I'm getting backlash for that. I don't know why I would get backlash for saying Trump voters are stupid, racist, and sexist, but I guess it's just uncomfortable for you to hear these things. God, this show can't get taken off the air soon enough, although I don't know what we would do with about a third of our content on this program. So keep going, Sonny.
Didn't vote for him because of racism and misogyny. They voted for him because they felt like, I think the biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family.
Well,
And whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans,
Black people
they thought that he was
one of the
reflective.
poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny, you're missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say I'm white, I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not what stat. What stat are you talking about?
Let me just dissect the
Yes, you can. There's a lot
Hold
more
on,
to this.
hold on.
Let me just
Calm down. Everybody just take a breath. Take a breath.
Well,
take a beat.
Well, let me jump in here because I think, Sonny, what you say is valid. And I think absolutely that is part of the problem. But when we hang our hat on that's the only problem or
No
the
one's
main,
saying it's the only.
I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying the backlash is that when people hang their hat on that being the only reason, any criticism of Vice President Harris must be because she's a woman or she's Black. I voted for Hillary Clinton, not because she was a woman, she was the most qualified. I voted for Vice President Kamala Harris because more of my values fell in line with what she stood for. So all of that can be true. There is something here to the socioeconomic class, though, that is crossing racial divide in academic and education, too. Americans with a college degree 30 years ago were roughly 20% of the population and held the same percentage of household wealth as those without a degree. Yeah. 30 years later, this is important, Americans with a college degree account for 38% of the population and 73% of the household wealth. The haves and the have-nots have gone so far apart that they are rising up right now, and they cross every line of our democracy.
Okay, all right, that's actually a very interesting point that she made. She didn't connect the dots as much as she should have, because also part of that, in terms of how many people in this country had an advanced degree or just a basic bachelor's degree 20, 30 years ago versus now, also tells the tale that these degrees are somewhat meaningless right now. People get degrees because they were sold a bill of goods that if you get a college degree, then everything's going to be set for you and you're going to get a job and you're going to be able to make more money than anybody else. And people are now realizing that that's not true. And so when people have their college degrees, they try to self-validate the poor choices that they've made, and they like to think of themselves as smarter and more educated, when in fact they're not. By the way, one other thing on the racial divide that Sunny Hostin is really, really insistent on, as you saw with her debating her friend Alyssa Farah there. The fact of the matter is the racial divide was tighter here, as Alyssa pointed out, than it ever has been. This whole idea is, well, Black people want a better life too, so why didn't they vote that way? It's so disingenuous and such a lie, because the fact of the matter is we know that for the last 40 plus years, the voting trends for Black Americans have been so solidly with Democrats, regardless of who the candidate is, whether the candidate is Black or white or a male or a female. Blacks in this country have voted Democrats, sadly, election after election, because they have been sold a bill of goods by that party. And they have been raised to think, number one, that Republicans are racist, and number two, that they need the Democrats to give them the benefits and the programs. And if the Democrats aren't there in power, then your schools are going to get, completely decimated, and your streets are going to be full of crime and trash. And that, oh, wait a second, these cities that have decimated school systems and who have crime and trash all over the sidewalks are actually run almost 100% by Democrats. So I don't know why they keep buying that story, but that's what they've been told. The fact of the matter is that's not going to get reversed anytime soon. What you do is what Donald Trump has done, which is slowly, election after election, start to build back trust with the Black community and actually build that coalition. Sunny Hostin is saying this because she can see the numbers, actually, the very numbers that she's showing you. And she knows that this election season, more Blacks voted for a Republican than any time in the last 40 years. And that terrifies her. It terrifies all Democrats. And so what do they do when they're scared and they think Republicans are winning? They do what they always do. They call us racist. They call Republicans racist. They call conservatives racist. They call white people racist. They call America racist. It's all they know. It's all they know. But as we showed right here, the actual numbers that are supposed to support that hypothesis from Sunny Hostin, that assertion from Sunny Hostin, the actual numbers show the opposite. The actual numbers show that if there is any sort of racial bias in the way people voted this time around, sadly, it appears to be with Black voters. Less so than before, but sadly, that's where it is. All right. I think we're going to leave it there. Aloha, Robin. Robin aku, maliki liki maka. I love watching your show. It's always entertaining, but filled with facts. It's true. See, oftentimes out there, you're either entertaining or you got facts. It's very rare to find the combination. Thank you, Robin. That means a lot to us. Thank you. Apiaman, great job as always for $10. Oh, that's like a Big Mac and a 6-piece chicken McNuggets. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Are we going to have to change the Big Mac fund to something else now that RFK Jr. is going to be Secretary of Health and Human Services? What do you think, Kevin? Are we going to have to start eating tofu or something?
I will not eat tofu.
No, me neither. How about we just go with ribeyes? How about if we just up our game? Instead of Big Macs, we're going to start just eating ribeyes and we'll go carnivore.
Deal.
Yes. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like. We're going to break out these segments today that we did, 4 of them, as individual videos. If any of them spoke to you or made your heart sing, why don't you come back, watch them, view them, give us some comments, and then send them on their way on your Facebook page, on your Twitter account or X account, Truth Social, or maybe even on your favorite Reddit or on your Discord. Wherever you can share our videos, that really builds our audience and gets more people watching us. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching us today on Town Hall Media. My name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.